Hi, it's TK with the weekly words of encouragement. In this installment of the Parables of Jesus series, we will consider the parable of the Vineyard Workers, which is recorded in Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. This parable is a story about the kingdom of heaven. Remember, parables are earthly stories with heavenly meaning, and Jesus tells us right from the beginning that the parable of the vineyard workers is about more than workers in a vineyard. It describes kingdom principles. So let's chat about the parable. Early one morning, a landowner hired workers for his vineyard. When he hired these workers, he agreed to pay the normal daily wage. As the early hires were working, the landowner hired additional workers around 9 a.m. and this time he said he would pay them whatever was right at the end of the day. The landowner hired additional workers again at noon and 3 p.m. Then at 5 p.m. he hired more workers for his vineyard. At the end of the workday, the landowner instructed his foreman to pay the workers, beginning with the workers who started working at 5 p.m. The last hired workers received a full day's pay, so the first hired workers assumed they would receive more because they had been working longer, but they received the same full day's pay. The first hired workers protested. Those people worked only 1 hour, and yet you've paid them just as much as you paid us who worked all day in the scorching heat. The landowner noted, "Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I am kind to others?" The landowner's response was definitely a mic drop moment. He could be generous with his money if he wanted to be. He had not promised the early hired workers more pay than the later hired workers. He had agreed to pay a full day's wage, and he fulfilled that agreement. He was fair. And the landowner wanted to pay the later hired workers a full day's pay as well, and it was his prerogative to do so. He was generous. And don't miss this, the landowner had the foreman pay the later hired workers first. As Jesus said to conclude the parable, so those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last. The last will be first. As we mentioned, this parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Dr. Tony Evans describes this heavenly meaning in his Bible commentary. Through this story, Jesus was teaching that God is both fair and generous. We should rejoice when God is gracious toward others and not resented. Just as the landowner was fair to the workers hired early in the morning by giving them the agreed upon pay, God is fair to those who have been saved for a long time. They will spend eternity with Him. And just as the landowner was generous to the later hired workers by giving them a full day's pay, even though they didn't work the full day, God is generous with those who have not been saved very long. They will also spend eternity with Him. In other words, this parable is a reminder to believers, the vineyard workers, that God, the landowner, is gracious and generous to us all by offering salvation through Jesus Christ. So regardless of our status as a new believer or a longtime follower of Christ, we can enter the kingdom of heaven, receive a full day's pay, because of God's gracious generosity and not the amount of time we've been saved, worked in the vineyard. Like the thief on the cross next to Jesus, salvation is available to everyone, even in the very last moments of their lives, the workers hired at 5 p.m. So whether you've been saved for decades or you've been saved 1 day or 1 hour, you will spend eternity with Jesus. Let's not resent those who accept the free gift of salvation later than we did. Instead, let's rejoice that we will all see the kingdom of heaven. Amen. I pray you are blessed by this devotional, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.